Hello, I'm James,
Hi, I'm Jimmy,
and welcome to A Job Done Well.
the podcast that helps you improve your performance and enjoyment at work.
Good morning. What we're talking about today, enough.
Good morning, James. Today, we are going to be talking about fitting in. Just because you're doing well in a job doesn't mean that you actually belong there. And if you feel that you're not quite fitting in and you ignore it, in the long term, it can have a massive impact on you. So have you ever felt that you were performing well, but you weren't really being true to yourself, or you felt uncomfortable in the environment you're in?
I've quite often felt uncomfortable. I'm not sure about the performing well bit, but
Anyhow, we are going to explore the topic of fitting in and what you can do about it and what managers should do about it as well. To help us,
what you mean? We've got
have-
an expert because we don't know what we're talking about.
we weren't the experts at fitting in, James. In fact, you reveled in the fact that you didn't fit in most places. So we have got our favourite psychotherapist.
Or just
Our
psycho for sure.
Yeah, if that'll
We've got
help.
our
you.
favourite psychotherapist, Dawn Wray back. Welcome back, Dawn.
Hello.
Before we get going, do you want to give a 30-second intro to yourself for those who didn't catch your previous episodes?
Yeah, so I'm Dawn. I'm a Gestalt psychotherapist, which is important and will be important to this topic. And I used to work with James and Jimmy, and then I have since retrained as a Gestalt psychotherapist, supervisor, and teacher. It's what I do at practice psychotherapy.
Good to have you back to it.
Why are we talking about fitting in? Well, everyone has experienced this to varying degrees, and sometimes you succeed somewhere, but you feel like you're acting all the time. You get promoted, you're delivering, but you don't feel quite right, and work can be exhausting because you're always on. You always have to have your game face on. Or have you ever had it said to you that your face doesn't fit here? That's what we'll be exploring today. So to start things off, Dawn,
Mm-hmm.
if we think about fitting in or not fitting in, what happens to people psychologically in this situation?
So fitting in is really hard, and it's hard for reasons that people might not necessarily first think. It's not like a social skills. Do I fit? Don't I fit? What do I do? What don't I do? Fitting in speaks to and activates really old patterns for us. So where we fit in the world starts, and our sense of, even our very sense of safety in the world goes back to how we felt like we fitted in our family groups, in our upbringing, it triggers something quite visceral in whether we fit in or not. Where I learned to belong, I know you've covered belonging before, but how I've learned to belong, and therefore whether I feel like I fit in here or not, or whether my face fits here or not, actually triggers really deep senses of patterns of behavior or patterns of how I have been in the world in the past. So things like things you might see, for example, and we'll come on to this, I guess, in the future, is like I would call it confluence, but how we might try to be like other people in order to fit in, how we might look like other people, talk like other people, behave like other people. That can be a way that people will try to fit in, because actually if I don't agree with you, if I don't look like you, then I might be rejected or excluded, and that goes right to our core.
It's interesting, John, because it can be easy, can't it? It can be just as, are you wearing the same clothes?
Literally,
And people do it. Yeah.
So I shared with both of you previously the experience I had when we worked together, and our boss at the time took me aside and was saying how great I was doing and how I'd been marked out for future great things if I'd just tuck in my shirt.
Yeah.
So and that felt, we went from big important stuff to something felt that really petty. And I guess at that point, I knew in that organisation I didn't fit in. And if I wanted to stay long term, I would have to compromise a lot of myself.
Yeah, exactly that. Because fitting in is part of our identity, and work is a huge part of our identity. Yeah. So you're talking about how I meet the world and who I think I am as a person and how I see myself as a person. You're at that boundary when you're talking about fitting in at work. And work is a massive part of who I am and how I identify who I am.
So the point you're making about fitting in is that the desire to fit in is triggered and influenced by a lot of stuff in our past.
Yeah. And the things we will do in order to fit in, like I've mentioned one of them, like being like the people around you. You might choose to just be really agreeable and agree with everything that's going on and swallow down this is the way things are around here, even though it's not really what I think and feel in here, because that helps me fit in. If I agree with you, Jimmy, I fit in. Like, we belong. I fit with you if I agree with you. And that avoidance of conflict.
And I thought, Dawn, we do it because it's just a safer option, really.
Or we
And
might choose to not say. And actually, I might want to tell you that I don't agree, or that was a harmful thing to say. I won't say that to you, because if I say that to you, I risk not fitting in. So I'll keep it to myself. And that has an effect on how I feel in the workplace, because I'm keeping everything in.
And we talk a lot, and it's interesting your point about not tucking your shirt in. Well, you wear a scruffy bugger, but I think the key point is people thought you weren't professional because you weren't tucking your shirt in. So we have this concept of professionalism, but professionalism really, it depends on where you happen to be. It's just socially sanctioned masking, isn't it? It's not anything professional. It's just about being the same as the other people.
Yeah. And I would argue, James, that in that organisation, their definition of professional or of professional appearance in other organisations would have been considered not right.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's a very subjective thing. But it for me, it wasn't tuck your shirt in or not, is almost irrelevant. It was the fact that the organisation felt it was important, and that was fitting in physically was important to them. And I thought, I don't want to compromise who I am because I don't look quite like you. To me, that was a compromise. How do you, I guess that's the point there. How do you get that balance between, the desire to fit in that often we have with actually I'm compromising some of myself?
So before we go there, can I ask another question before we get into how you do it? Is it really a problem?
It becomes a problem when you're being asked to override yourself, and knowing that I'm doing that even can be a problem, but overriding yourself or losing yourself at the expense of fitting into that organisation can have massive psychological, even physiological impacts. And it's whether you're doing those things through choice, like Jimmy might have chosen to tuck his shirt in because he wants to fit in and he's the big boss, he's fine to do that. But when that is a constant stream or compromising myself in order to be in this workplace, that can cause all kinds of problems.
Yeah, and it wasn't, like I say, that it's such a flippant, but the point was, it wasn't the act that was bothering me, it was the organisational, what that signified about appearance, diversity, how you act, the values of the organisation. It was the ripple that wasn't intended. I don't think it was consciously intended at the time. It's just, oh God, I don't really need to be a part of that. What about you guys? What's been your experience of fitting in or not? Because like James, you almost revel in the fact that you don't fit in some organisations.
And I'm going to sound very up myself here. Or maybe I am, right? But
you're talking, James. Of course you are.
So I've always worked in development roles. Yeah. So it's always been about doing things differently. So to a certain extent, that was part of my persona. So it was at work, I am not going to fit in because I am here to do things differently, and that is what you're paying me for. Right? That sounds a bit strange, but that would mean that, for example, I would wear jeans with a shirt and tie. Right? And you can argue the toss about my style choices, but it was a very deliberate choice on my part to say, no, I'm not like you guys. But maybe I did that because that's what was expected of me. So I think you're right, Tonya. You do these things. And I did deliberately set myself apart, but I might have done it because I thought I should, because that was what was expected of me.
It's the disconnect between how, I hate this word, authentic, but congruent is maybe a better word. How congruently me can I be? And what do I need to compromise of that in order to fit in? And when the gap between those two things is too big, or they rub against each other in too difficult a way, that's when you lose yourself and run the risk of all kinds of problems depending on what's going on.
It's a very fine line, because the question is, are you adapting or are you actually editing yourself? And I think those are two.
And they're the same thing. And there's a kind of how you would know whether you're doing that, we can get to in a bit. But to your point around you were being paid to be different, that sounds to me like it's authentic enough. Like that is enough of you and you being you, there was enough of that for you to feel like you could make compromises elsewhere, I imagine, in order that you just fit in.
Yeah, and Dawn, just admit when James talks about this sort of stuff, you're just thinking you could have some sessions with him and help him out, couldn't you?
Yeah.
But it need quite a lot
Long
of
term.
sessions. in fairness.
I haven't got enough money,
Yeah.
Dawn. Sorry.
Yeah.
You'd bankrupt me.
And Dawn, what's your personal perspective on fitting in?
My personal perspective, and probably the reason why I now do this and I don't work in a corporate, is that I felt like there was never room for discussion. Often, I felt like there had to be a right and a wrong, and a this or a that. And actually, sometimes the answers that you need to find are the ones where there's a discursive approach and you can be in the grey a little bit. And actually, I felt like I compromised myself and had to be seen to be, well, yes, this is the answer and that's what we're doing. And the black and whiteness, I think I was probably confluent in looking like I was very forthright and opinionated. And actually, inside, I wanted to be, well, hang on a minute, let's just open this up a bit. What is the solution to this? There's not a silver bullet. And I think I tried to fit in by seeming that way.
Yeah. One of the things I also experience is I think sometimes we're not intentional enough about this as a subject. Do I fit in here? It's almost like if you ask yourself that question, the answer is no, I don't fit in. It's almost like a rejection in many ways. And so we'll adapt and we'll meld and we'll lose. The danger is we lose ourselves. One of the things that helped me think about this as a subject and whether I fit in was I've always struggled to work in more macho environments and where there's lots of testosterone flowing around. And when I was relatively young, I worked as a postman and it was a completely male dominated environment. And actually it was extremely violent in supposedly a jokey banter sort of way. And I won't go into the detail, but there was random attacks on people. I found it really threatening and uncomfortable. And I realized I was never going to join in with attacking people, and B, the threat of being attacked myself was one that made me too uncomfortable. And it's like, I don't want to fit in here ever. And as a result, I always had it a little bit conscious in my mind as to whether you choose to fit into an environment. I know that's at the extreme.
Well, sorry, let me go in there though, because I think that's quite interesting. It's not about the threat of violence, though, is it? And what I'm trying to say is it's a very multifaceted thing, whether you fit in or not. Because another story you told is about working in a bookkeeper's where you faced an armed robber.
Bookkeepers. I don't think I'd have faced an armed
Up
robber
to
if I was a
now.
bookkeeper. It'd been a much safer environment, I think.
But whatever. But the point was, far more dangerous a bloke facing you down with a gun than being beaten up by a couple of posters. But I presume you fitted in or felt you fitted in much better at the bookmakers than the post office.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is that there's a whole plethora of things, and it's a sort of, it's not one single thing. There's a whole host of things there.
Come in there, because where this process is exhausting, of fitting in sometimes, is what you're talking about. I'm going to use a bit of therapeutic language, but I hope that's okay. So what you're talking about in fitting in is the contact boundary between me and the workplace, me and that team, me and those people. And we're always, all the time, even now, we're managing ourselves at that contact boundary. How much of myself can I show at that contact boundary? How safe do I feel at this contact? Like it's not a conscious thing, but we're doing it all of the time.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about in the postie situation is you were adjusting, because I don't like this, I don't like the banter, I don't like the violence, and you're constantly having to adjust yourself to meet what is at that contact boundary that you don't like. And that process of, I'm not going there, I'm going to that's an exhausting process. So when we're talking about fitting in, and actually, do I go beyond myself? Because you could have given in to the banter and fitting in, and people do. And you didn't. But actually, when we override ourselves, to override yourself in that situation would have been to join in the banter for the sake of fitting in.
Yeah.
And it's that continual adjustment of the contact boundary and the choices that you're making that you're talking about.
Our podcast is all about helping people, teams and organisations perform better and enjoy work more.
And I go as far as to say that we believe that everyone and every team has the potential to transform their performance by optimising what they currently do.
So if you'd like to discuss how we can help you transform your performance, then get in touch or maybe check out our website. We also do speaking events, mentoring and advice work as well. What's the impact of this? How does it impact you as an individual?
I would imagine, and I know from my own experience, not working with you guys, but there would be depression, anxiety, mental health issues. It could be burnout, all these phrases that people use all the time. These are all symptoms of this constant adjusting.
Why are we having this conversation? Because if you're in the situation where you don't fit into varying degrees, all of those things can happen to you.
Well, it
and so
plays on your mind as well, though, doesn't it? Because you end up in a position where you start to think you are worthless because you don't fit, and you start to see yourself as basically unhireable. So it can be a real confidence knock.
Yeah. So fitting in or not fitting in, and to varying degrees, I think we're all agree can have a fundamental impact on you as a person. Before we go into what do you do about it, how do I understand what's the difference between fitting in or not? Or am I just growing? Am I just learning? So it's because that not at the extreme, obviously, but it can be as you go into a new organization, a new job or whatever, there is an amount of adaptation you do as a human, and that can be growth. So how do you tell the difference?
From my perspective, I think they both feel really uncomfortable for a start. They are two sides of the same coin. They will both feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
For me, it's the quality of the discomfort. So if I feel like, I'm not quite fitting in, but I'm enlivened and I feel excited and I'm aware that like I do that and I'm okay and I'm going back for more, that's probably that I'm growing. But if I leave that day at work or that month at work and I'm drained and I'm grumpy and I feel completely exhausted and I'm dreading tomorrow's meeting, like the quality of that discomfort is very different. And quality is in like how you'd feel a fabric. I don't mean good or bad. I mean the texture of that discomfort. I think we should pay more attention to how we feel uncomfortable.
I've got an example of that. So when I first started work, I was in my early 20s, you'd have to ring people up. Right? I used to sit there and I used to practice what I was going to say before I picked up the phone because I was scared. I was worried about what people would think. But it was just a big jump from where I'd been before, and it was different and it was unusual. And to be honest with you, I think that was probably growth. Whereas there've been other times where I've had to almost rehearse my personality before I go into a meeting. Yeah. And when you're in your mid-40s or 50s and you're rehearsing your personality, that's not growth. Yeah. And so you're absolutely right, texture is the way to think about it. They're very different things.
Yeah. It's quite subtle and it needs some thought, because otherwise the danger is you get caught in the excusing everything as growth, or actually I shy away from growing because I just put it down to I don't fit in here.
Yeah. But if you'd come away from that feeling completely drained and depleted, that would be a different texture.
Yeah. But it can be hard to see the difference. So I'll give you another example. When the three of us worked together, at the end of my first week in that organisation, everyone had to dress up as school kids. And it was some sort of silly thing.
I'd just like to point out, I did not work there at this point.
You didn't? No. But the thing is, the point is, I realised that I'd never dressed up as a schoolboy since I was a schoolboy. But I realised that was part of the culture and the way the organisation was. There was that crossroads moment of I either embrace this or I'm going to feel uncomfortable by it and it's going to really cause me some issues. And there's no right answer here. I decided to embrace it. And as you both know, you saw me dressed up as everything from a gladiator to a Bond girl. And I embraced it. It was different for me and I enjoyed it. A number of our colleagues, mentioned no names, but I remember having a conversation with them and they had the same experience and decided that they didn't like it, but stayed there for years and felt constantly uncomfortable. And that's the difference, I think. If you were always avoiding having to do those sorts of things, it's tiring. Wears you out.
It does. I did in some introductions as part of my work with the Listening Collective and doing therapy in organisations. This topic comes up a lot in sessions with people who are struggling with their version of whether people internalise this and think it's them, or like, it comes up a lot. This, how I fit into this organisation, and is this right for me? And to go back to what I said earlier about it takes us back to relational patterns that were created like way back when. What you're talking about there can also be, and I know this from my own experience, like things that we've been told we should do. Like if you've got somebody who's got 3 older siblings and they've all been very successful and gone off and done amazing things, people carry around these messages that say, well, I should be successful. I should be the big manager. This is how I'm meant to be. Like it's a thing you carry around that isn't really you. And unpicking that sense of how someone has internalized not fitting in and that discomfort, whether it's self-despair or whether it's anger at the organization, like it'll come up and manifest in loads of different ways, but actually some of it can be really historical. Like people carry around this how I ought to be in the world, and actually it isn't really them. Does that make sense?
Do you think, John, are people good at noticing this in themselves?
No,
or do they just
they're not.
denial or what's yeah, go on.
Like people aren't generally good at noticing this about themselves. And I think this also speaks to what are the cultural norms organisationally or just generally. People will think, well, it's me that's the problem. That's really common.
Yeah.
It's me that's not competent. It's me that can't do it. It's me that's got the problem because I'm struggling with my mental health. Like people internalize the problem quite often.
So we're moving into what do you do about it? And that presumably, Dawn, is one of the first things that you need to think about is how do you go about building that self-awareness of what's actually really going on here? Obviously, one of the things they could come and talk to you and spend some time with you. Is there anything else that people can do to really get a more grounded understanding of the situation they're in?
Yes, it's the short answer. I would always start with slowing down. How often do any of us slow down to actually pay attention to what's going on for us in any given day?
Okay.
Or do we just move really quickly from one thing to another thing and actually bypass ourselves?
Yeah.
And I just got really angry when Jimmy said that, and then we're on to the next thing within a millisecond.
It's like a flashback to when we worked together, Dawn.
Yeah, I still got the scars. Like, we don't slow down, pay attention to the feelings that might come up, or like that contact boundary I was talking about earlier. Like there will be a physical or emotional sense of that at some level in you, but how often do we slow down to pay attention to it? Like physiologically, I will quite often bring people's attention back into their body rather than just into your thought, because physiologically there'll be a response. You probably will be tense in your meeting. If you pay attention, are your legs tense? Are you just like jiggling your knees up and down? Am I picking at my pencil top? Like, if you pay attention and slow down, which is why I said at the beginning that I'm a Gestalt psychotherapist, and that's really important, because actually taking into account the whole field, my thoughts and my body and the organising, like that's important because we don't exist in isolation.
2 points just to pick up, Dawn. One is we don't slow down to spend time thinking, and we don't necessarily think about how we're reacting to things physically. I don't hold a lot of my stress mentally, I hold it physically.
Yeah.
And so I'll think, I'm all right with this situation because mentally I'm all right with it, and my back's twisting round at the same sort of time. And it's actually, like I say, slow down and think about it, and think about your physical reactions as well as your mental and emotional reactions.
Yeah. And like just like a good starter for that often is like, and it sounds a contrite thing to say, but it really works. Like, where's your breath? Like, if we're stressed, we'll hold our breath like up here. And if you feel myself, if I'm stressed and I'm up here, like it's a good sign that something's going on. And then you know where to start digging. You can then start to go, well, actually, what's happening here?
So you start off with slowing down. So that really is about awareness. What else can you do?
I think you can, like, not just me, I don't mean have therapy or therapy, but I'd always suggest talking with people. Like, who do you trust?
Yeah.
Can you get another pair of eyes on something? Because I think it's very easy, and I do this myself, to get lost in my own view of the world. And actually, if I just speak to you, James, you probably give me a completely different perspective on the same situation.
Say then you are coming to the conclusion that it is fitting in. How do you then think about your behaviour and ultimately your choices?
What do you mean? That's a big question.
Well, I've understood that I'm building awareness. I'm talking to people about how I'm finding this situation. When you start to draw conclusions that I'm not sure I quite fit in here, other than obviously at the extreme, I wasn't a postie for very long. Other than that extreme, what else can you do?
So there's a choice about whether to adapt and compromise. Can you do that choicefully? I think doing it out of awareness can be dangerous, but doing it choicefully can be a helpful thing. I am going to tuck my shirt in because I want to do well here, and actually it's no skin off my nose. I'm happy to do it. And if I do that in a choiceful way, that's okay. I often would ask people about whether they can be more authentic and what that would mean. Like, if I did be more me, say more of the things I want to say, can I show up in this workplace and be more how I need to be? Is that possible? Like, where would your experiments in that be? Because they don't have to be massive, but sometimes small changes in being me, rather than feeling like I'm constantly compromising myself for the organisation, that can be really helpful in terms of feeling like I've got some control over that, because I can be me and the world doesn't collapse.
But then I suppose there's a point here, Dawn, which is I might be looking at this and thinking, oh my God, I really do not fit in, or I need to adapt and I need to play some, Yeah. I might be kidding myself altogether. It's a bit like my chats with my favourite friend, Gemini. Gemini always tells me what I want to hear.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear what it thinks I want to hear. I want to hear what it thinks. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So it's your perception of not fitting in may be totally wrong. So there's an element of just being yourself some more and seeing what actually happens.
Well, what happens,
There's the trite phrase that often gets trotted out: bring more of yourself to work, be more. And they're all cliches. But the reality is, I think in many organizations I've worked in, sometimes that fitting in thing or not, and the need to compress myself and make myself small, it's in my head. It's not a reality. It's the organization doesn't want me to leave these things behind. And actually, to your point, Dawn, the reason I'm reacting to that is because of something that happened in my past, and how, like James said, if you were more of yourself, what would be the impact? Because you hear people, they say, oh, I'm too much. Well, who's judging that you're too much? Who thinks you're too much? Is it you think you're too much, or does the world think you're too much? Does this organisation think you're too much?
And that would be exactly the kind of work we would do with managers at the Listening Collective, because it would be that I would literally make that challenge. What would happen if you just were a bit more you and didn't try to fit into something that maybe is your imagining of the situation? It's not actually the situation. What would happen?
Yeah.
We hope you're enjoying and getting value from listening to our podcast.
If you are, please can you share it online on social media with friends and colleagues?
We appreciate 5-star reviews, and we really do, but any feedback on how we can improve or subject that you'd like us to cover, just drop us a line and get in touch.
This all helps us bring the best quality show to you to ensure that you can improve your performance and enjoyment at work.
But then, so I suppose what we're saying is there are 3 things or 3 levels you go through. One is being aware. Is this a problem or not? Number 2 is, well, if it is a problem, trying stuff to see, is it really a problem? Is it just, I think there's an issue here. But then ultimately you do get to that decision point out, which is difficult, but do I lean in or do I leave, frankly? Yeah, which is your ultimate. But of course, if you leave, there's no guarantee you're going to go to anywhere that's any flipping better. So it's not the panacea.
Dawn, you segued wonderfully into managers. So that's about how I think about it. But a lot of people listening to this podcast manage teams. So what are your kind of hints and tips for managers who need to think about this? Because we said it has a massive impact in people's lives. So should we be thinking about this?
I think we should be very conscious of when people agree with us all of the time, or are quiet, or seem to fit in perfectly, because no one ever does. It's a bit like the perfect child, right? And are my people just compromising themselves in order to please me? I think that would be a really good one.
An interesting point there, Dawn, because I think a lot of organizations is structural, right? They are set up to reward people who do what they say or do what is asked of them, smile pleasantly, and don't give people a hard time.
So watching out for people being very agreeable or very challenging. I'm trying to understand that. What else
very
should
quiet.
managers think about?
I think if people are turning all of this inside and blaming themselves, they will invariably be really quiet, because it's me that's the problem. Oh, I need to do better. And there'll be an internal dialogue going on that won't be spoken out.
Yeah, or they're scared of the consequences.
Or they're scared of the consequences,
We talked about all of the physical and mental impacts that could be having. One thing you can be pretty sure of is that a person is not performing well. So if you don't address some of these things, the person won't be enjoying work, but they're not going to be performing well, and you need that. So you can do some observation. What else can you do to help your team?
I think you have the hard conversations and don't deflect from them. I don't think there's an easy answer to that. I don't know what you guys think. One-to-ones are important for a reason, because that's the space where you can actually level and ask the difficult questions and create a space where people can actually be with some of this stuff and not just carry on playing out whatever the corporate picture is.
I think it takes time as well, Dawn.
Just a bit of time.
So a bit like your story about the people who've been there 30 years, but when I've had new teams, it takes a while for them to accept that, yes, I do want them to challenge me. And no, I'm not just saying it. And that can take 6 months. So it is almost repeatedly going back and saying, no, I know you're nodding, but I don't think you agree with me. What do you really think?
Yeah. I also think, I'm hesitating answering the question because everything I'm saying and thinking sounds contrite, but that's because it is. Like the time spent, the being present, the living and breathing this yourself and being human and imperfect. And these are all things that get talked about a lot, but done well, they are the fabric of this topic, because then people feel like they're being met in their humanness, if that's the right, they're being met as a person rather than just in some corporate machine as an employee.
One of the key things about managing people is that you're dealing with humans, and humans are incredibly complex, and we're a bundle of experience and emotion and all sorts of things. And so when you get something like this subject, do you fit in? Whilst it can sound a bit binary, yes or no, the answer of it is not binary, and it is incredibly complex. So there are lots of things to consider in this.
And at that contact boundary we were talking about, and I'm doing a workshop shortly about resistance to coaching your team. There's an organization we're working with that wants some help with their managers' resistance to coaching their direct reports. And I think the biggest resistance to coaching and to some of these things you're talking about is conflict. People are afraid of conflict. If I show up at me, if I ask the difficult question, if I go against the grain, it isn't going to be smooth. And I think as managers, we need to accept that it isn't going to be smooth.
Go back and listen to the episode that we did with Charles Irvine on conflict being your greatest natural resource.
Nice plug, well done.
Yeah. Well, it is.
Yeah,
I will listen to it because he's right. It is.
Yeah.
I did do a little bit of research before this episode, so much as I might stunning, but I looked, is there any evidence that belonging, which is obviously the opposite of not fitting in, but belonging drives performance? And there is an Harvard Business Review article which says employees who think they belong perform 3.5 times better now. Clearly, it has a big impact,
Well,
but belonging
did some research on this before, and actually, I don't know whether it's 3.5 times, but where I got to on that was because all of the energy that's being put into the things we were talking about earlier, whether I'm laughing and joking to deflect away from how I feel, or whether I'm worrying internally, all those things, that takes energy. And if I'm not putting that energy into all of that, I've now got energy to do my job and to perform better.
And that's where you'll get your 3.5 times uplift.
But then,
presumably.
so belonging isn't about we all get along.
Yeah, I can be authentically me and not have to compromise more of me than I need to do my job.
In summary, we talked about the importance of this, and that 3.5 times better performance rounds it off really nicely. But that's because it's so difficult. It's such an emotive task. It sounds, when we start off, it sounds like, do you fit in, yes or no? It sounds very simple. We've gone through the emotional, the psychological, the physical impacts of this, and we talked through that. Then we talked a bit around how, as an individual, you could understand the difference between fitting in and growth. And then, Dawn, you shared some of those things around build your self-awareness, experiment with some trying different stuff out. And then if all fails, then you've got some decisions to make. And then we talked about some advice for managers of how you can go about unlocking that 3.5 times improvement. But it's not simple. So this is not, it's not a quick fix. Dawn, James, anything to add? Dawn?
I would say all of what Jimmy's just said, because, and it's right back to the beginning of the podcast, because it's fitting in is activating relational patterns that go deep. That's why it's not simple, because you're activating something that is really viscerally important.
And on that note, we'll call it a day. Thanks, Dawn, for joining us and sharing your wisdom again.
It was good fun.
We cover a whole host of topics on this podcast,
from purpose to corporate jargon,
but always focused on one thing: getting the job done well.
Easier said than done. So if you've got unhappy customers or employees, bosses or regulators breathing down your neck,
if your backlogs are out of control and your costs are spiraling, and that big IT transformation project that you've been promised just keeps failing to deliver,
we can help. If you need to improve your performance, your team's performance, or your organisation's, get in touch at jimmy@ajobdonewell.com
or James@ajobdonewell.com.